Back, guys, to another episode of Game Time Discussions. I'm Cameron Selby here with Emery Cuzzy. Today, we are going to continue our positional ranking series, and we're going to go to the running back position. Now we're going to start to get into some fun fantasy relevant positions. This class is not nearly as strong as last year, but it's definitely a class worth a couple names worth mentioning.
Yeah, I think this is one of those classes where you're going to see, when it comes draft day, they're going to be much later. I don't know if we'll actually see the first running back take until round 3, which is, I don't think we've seen that in a long time. So this is going to be one of those things where, these guys are going to come in as like one Bs to most guys. They're going to add depth to teams, but they're also, like you talked about with fantasy, they could end up being the guy just like that, just kind of like if like Ty Spears last year when Derrick Henry goes down. So there's some guys in this class that are going to be good complements to guys, and they'll fit well. So it's not necessarily the best class in the world, but there's a lot of guys that, are scat backs, can catch the ball. We'll make that kind of help in the pass game.
And you also have, playoff caliber teams like the Chargers, the Bengals, the Cowboys that haven't really established a starting running back yet.
Right.
With the moves losing Mixon, Pollard, and Eckler, they haven't really replaced him with somebody that's going to get the 20 touches that we were accustomed to seeing. So it could very well be some of these guys. So we're going to kick it off. Several honorable mentions: Cody Schrader out of Missouri, Ray Davis out of Kentucky, Jalen Wright out of Tennessee, Dylan Lobb out of New Hampshire, and Jahard Jordan out of Louisville.
Right.
I guess give us a little bit of tidbit about each one. Several SEC guys, and then one lower tier school. What stands out to you about this group?
So Cody Schrader is actually one of the coolest stories of the draft, I guess. He won what is called the Burlsworth Award this year, which is for the most outstanding walk-on. He was an original walk-on turned most rushing yards in this season out of all players. So he's exciting guy. Definitely worth talking about. First team All-American. He lacks that athleticism, and there's a reason he was a walk-on. He lacks the athleticism to possibly be an NFL caliber starter. But he was able to do it, obviously, at Missouri. Missouri has a ton of really good football players that are coming out this year. He's just a wild card to me. He's one of those guys that I don't know what's going to happen, because he could end up being, one of those guys that you see like Isaiah Pacheco, where he gets the ball, 15 to 18 times a game, and he runs really hard.
Makes the most out of his opportunity.
Exactly. So he might be that guy. But it's still up in the air because he does lack the athleticism. Next with Ray Davis out of Kentucky. He is an interesting guy. He's one of those guys that I wanted to find a way to put on this list, I guess, because he runs so hard. Like, he is just like a bowling ball. He's trying to, take your head off type of runner. He makes it, really fun. And the Senior Bowl was really where I saw that the most, was because like his film is great, but all these guys' film is great. That's one of those things. But when you go up against guys that are also talented, seeing who comes out and is like the best of the best, he was one of those guys that really stood out to me at the Senior Bowl. So I think that he kind of helped his cause. I still don't know that I think he's, he's probably a 2. And like he kind of reminds me of like remember when Zach Moss went to the Buffalo Bills and like his role? That's kind of what I see with Ray Davis, is that kind of role. Good player, can play if he has to, but I don't know that he'll ever be like a true starter kind of guy.
Right.
So yeah, he's cool though. He's a cool player.
Yeah, and then next, Jalen Wright. He's actually kind of lower on our board compared to other lists. He might be cracking the top 7, which is the rankings that we have in most people's lists, but he's not in that. Why is that?
So he has all the he's great speed. I mean, he ran a 4.38 at the combine. That's not the problem. He's pretty good patience. I don't know that I see it like this. Everybody else wants to put him in this like box of like he could be the number one running back in this class. And I'm like, I'm not there. I don't know where. Like, I think his biggest problem is he always is looking for like the big play, right? He never takes like 3-4 yards. He wants to get, 15 yards on every play. And sometimes like that hinders his actual like ability. Yes, he's going to break off more 20-yard plays than other guys. But at the same time, I just need him to lower his head when it's inside zone and there's only one way to go, and he needs to run through that hole and get like fall forward for 2 yards rather than taking a 3-yard loss and putting his offense in a bad situation. So I saw a little bit too much of that. That can always be fixed, but yeah, he's a good player. Other people are higher. Maybe we'll see what happens at the end of the day with him. So yeah.
Do you think, like we said, very end of round 2, round 3 is where we'll start seeing running backs kind of come off, but I think it'll kind of come off in surplus. Like
Right.
Most of them will be, or not most of them, but probably about 4 or 5 guys that could be a round 3 day pick. Do you think that he will be in that range, even though maybe he doesn't deserve or warrant that?
I think he's probably a round 3 guy. I think it's a late round 3. I think, like you said, it's going to be like everybody comes off the board at the same time, and we also don't know which guy is going to be the first guy. It's going to be kind of like a shotgun effect. Like you could kind of pick your guy and be like, put your staple that this is the first running back off the board, but no one really knows because there's so many different kinds of running backs, first off. And second off, every team is going to want a different kind of complement, right? So we have guys in this class that are like, bowling ball, like is Zeke, bowling ball-esque, and then you have the Tony Pollards, like their complement in this class also. Jalen Wright kind of fits the Tony Pollard-esque style more than the Zeke style. So
right. Yeah, and then wrapping up honorable mentions, like we said, Dylan Lobb out of New Hampshire, Jahar Jordan out of Louisville. Give us a little tidbit about these.
So Dylan Lobb is he's out of New Hampshire, small school. Your typical scat back. I kind of wanted to put him on here to kind of talk about him because he is the receiving back. He's the guy that had I believe 50 catches this year out of the backfield. So you'd expect him to just kind of be that kind of New England, guy that only plays on passing downs, James White, Rex Burkhead type of guy. So that's kind of why he's on here, just so everybody knows who he is and like talk about his abilities. And then Jahar Jordan, he actually is one of the oldest players in this draft. That's part of the reason why he's not higher on this list, because I actually really liked his tape. I thought he looked really good, but then I was like, I started doing other research and I was like, oh, like he'll be 25 almost, and that's definitely a problem, because in the running back position, we see 28 being the kind of the threshold, I guess is how we could put it.
Right, and he'll end that before he's even done with his first contract.
Exactly. So it makes it hard for him to get another job. But he's really good. That's the big thing too, is like, if you want a guy that's going to help you right now and like you won't have to pay very much money for in the 6th, 7th round, this is a guy that would do a lot for your team. So absolutely. And he also, he's older, but he did play with a complement at Louisville where he didn't have to run the ball the whole time. So that helps at least too.
Right. So yeah, let's get into it. We'll kick off our rankings at number 7, starting with Bucky Irving out of Oregon. He's one of those, like you said, with Dylan Lobb, scat back, but he was one that kind of didn't impress us as much early on in this process. Break that down a little bit more for us.
So I think personally that Bucky Irving is a product of his environment. Oregon is such a good, high-powered offense that Bucky Irving, being the starter, just kind of got the opportunities in certain like big downs and plays. The 4.55 40 was kind of underwhelming when we expect him to, probably run in the 4.4s. He's a typical scat back. He's never going to be like, he's 195 pounds. He's not going to be your like bruiser. He's not going to get the ball, not going to run the ball 15 plus times a game. So we were kind of expecting him to, have a much higher speed, I guess. And then, I mean, he had 55 receptions this year. So that was good to see. But he wasn't explosive. And this is something that I think analysts are starting to see more with him, is that like he had a bunch of 15+ yard runs against 6-man boxes. He didn't have, he's not going to be able to create himself, I feel like. He fits a scheme where he, outside zone run. He needs that style of scheme. But I kind of came off of the film wishing for more, and then the combine wishing for more. But I still think, he's going to be, a typical number 2, right? He could be a top 3 guy out of this draft class, drafted, but I don't know that he'll live up to that, is the biggest problem.
Right. I mean, on the surface, it kind of feels like it's a little Austin Eckler.
Okay, yeah.
Similar size, not over the top speed, but Austin Eckler, the difference is he was undrafted and he overproduced based on, where he was picked and made the most of his opportunity. Bucky Irving is one of the top projected running backs to come off the board, and 3rd round pick versus undrafted pick, if you have the same production, it doesn't always correlate well.
Yeah, and Austin Eckler, I mean, obviously had a great production with the Chargers, but it's just, can Bucky find a team where he's asked to be the number 1 running back, where he gets the ball 15+ times a game, and also take on the workload like of an Austin Eckler? I don't think that that's actually in the cards. I think he's more of a 35%, kind of workload guy. Sure. And so it's going to be a little bit harder, but he's really young. He's growing to do. His 3.99 yards after contact was really good. So I think that's good, but most of his game will be what he can do in the pass game for a team, and why he gets drafted for that reason.
That's going to be his, like, quote unquote fantasy impact. Is that it doesn't matter the talent, but if he gets like 70 catches, then he's going to be a top 20 option.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, that's just kind of how today's game works for scat back.
I think too, it's like with fantasy versus actual talent, running back is one of the biggest differentiators. Because if you get the opportunities, it doesn't matter how good you are. We talk about James Conner all the time. He consistently is a good fantasy option, even knowing we don't necessarily believe he's the best running back in the world. And there's some guys that, Tony Pollard, we're going to have one Bs even that can't be, the guy, the 1A, the alpha running back, but are really good as 1Bs, coming in 40% of the snaps, getting receptions, breaking off long runs because they're fresh. And so,
or the Jamal Williams of the world, punching in 17 1-yard touchdowns, and just flying up scoreboards. But we'll get more into fantasy later on. But as we're kind of going down, since these are later round picks, these are the handcuffs and the late round picks that we're looking at that are all important for that style of fan. So
best ball, I think best ball actually is probably the thing that, like, you talk about with these rookies. Best ball is going to be the thing that you want, like some of these, like little bit of each of these rookies, because some of them are going to go to situations with an opportunity to get 40%, 50% of the snaps, while others are going to go to like the true number 2s, sitting behind certain guys.
And all you need is just that guy to go down for a month and be in the right situation at the right time.
Zach Moss.
Yeah. Kyron Williams is another one in recent years that just late round pick that just gets the opportunity and runs with it. So moving on, very popular name coming out of Michigan, Blake Corum. He's one of the guys that is one of the older ones in this class, and he actually doesn't, compared to the All-American status that he gets and being a running back of the year in the Big Ten, we're not as impressed with his, I guess, abilities as much as others.
So I think that this is one of our biggest differences with like the main public. I think most people have him in the top 3. It's like a lock. And I think a lot of people want him to go to the Chargers and things like that. I'll be honest, I'm not impressed. You just gotta, okay, so here's some quick stats. 4.8 yards per carry. One of the lower on this list by far.
In the NFL, excellent number. But
yeah.
College, usually 6 plus is the ideal mark.
Yeah, I think honestly, like if you're getting 6.5 plus, you're starting to push for like a second round grade, you know, kind of thing. 2.42 yards after contact, which is atrocious, possibly the worst in this class. Now, I know everybody's going to make the case that Michigan only runs the ball. They had 8 people in the box every time against them. Okay, he also got the ball like 20 times a game. So all of these stats, like you're going to be like, oh yeah, well he's always seeing 8-man boxes. Well, okay, great, but he's also getting the ball 20 times, and he's not being productive with it. He's not the next stat, 27.4 elusive rating. Basically, can't make people miss is what that means. And I saw that a lot. He doesn't have breakaway speed. The 4.53, he shows that. He does not break away from DBs. He does not get out in the open and, you know, do these crazy, like, you know, 50, 60-yard runs. 23 out of 27 of his touchdowns this year were from less than 5 yards. And so that kind of just explains, you know, of course, 27 touchdowns is awesome. But that is a benefit of the offense you are in and getting the ball close to the goal line, having, you know, all the O linemen in the world, you know, they have, you know, we love talking about tackles, but their interior O line have some of the best interior O line in the all of college football. The push that they get is insane. So yeah, I mean, I guess the age, because he's 23.7 when the season starts, plus the unproductiveness in an offense that kind of feels like you should be more productive. He was All-American, running back of the year, but it's a little bit cloudy because he was on a undefeated team that handed him the ball basically every play. 31 straight runs in the second half of games, things like that. So yeah, it's still worrisome. He's not necessarily the most athletic guy either. He's not tall. He's a little guy. But yeah, so we'll see. I think we're definitely lower on him. I think there's a lot more explosive and more, you know, productive guys later on. So
yeah, and I mean, very different sizes, but I just want to bring up like a comparison. If you want to bring up the 27 touchdowns, like Najee Harris set the Bama program record for touchdowns in the season and all time as a running back, and obviously that propelled him to be a first round grade. But we had similar thoughts on that. You know, not a ton of breakaway speed.
Yeah,
doesn't make people miss. He just kind of goes forward. That's fine, but that didn't set him apart just because he scored 30 plus touchdowns in the season. And then if you look at him now, if you're an NFL fan, do you think that Najee Harris is a top 10 running back? No. It's not close. He actually is losing playing time to Jalen Warren, who's a late round pick. Yeah. So it's not an end all be all being productive in college. You actually have to show like the advanced stats. They are even more important.
Oh yeah.
There. So, but yeah, let's break down our top 5, starting off MarShawn Lloyd. He is one that is an explosive guy that does take the top off, 7.1 yards per attempt, yards after contact, basically 4.
Yeah, absolutely.
And very good. Very, very impressive guy. The only thing is the age. And he also didn't have a full-time workload at USC. So give us a little bit about him. He did impress at the combine as well.
He didn't have a full-time workload at either USC's. He didn't have a full-time workload at South Carolina or at Southern California. And that's not the worst thing in the world. That keeps him fresh. He's actually, funny enough, he's a very like put together back, like when you look at him. But he's more of probably a scat back, probably that style of play. I would say, you know, and I can, you know, he had less receptions than expected probably this year, compared to, excuse me, compared to his production in South Carolina. But he's definitely one of those guys that you're like, okay, what can his explosiveness turn into? Because he's very strong guy. Lower body is just, he's very strong,
Mm-hmm.
very like pro ready style. Played with a lot of really good players around him at USC. And his elusiveness rating was the highest in the class. He had basically a perfect elusiveness rating, 177.0, which is unheard of.
Mm-hmm.
He is one of the guys, he had 15 plus yard carries. And we just talked about him having a role where he only got the ball like 11, 12 times rushing a game. To have 15 plus yard carries, that's more than Blake Corum, the guy we just talked about,
right,
who got the ball twice as much, 3 times as much. So that was pretty good. He only has 227 carries in the last 2 seasons. So what that means to me is he just doesn't have the wear and tear on his body. We talked about it with like Josh Jacobs when he came out. Josh Jacobs didn't have that wear and tear, and that's why he truly was a first round pick, because you just didn't have to worry about injury history or anything like that. That's not necessarily true. MarShawn Lloyd has had a little bit of injury history, but not at the level of some of the other guys on the list. Let's see. 31 less carries than Corum in 2023 alone. So Corum had 31 more carries in 2023 than MarShawn Lloyd had in both seasons, in the last 2 seasons. So that's kind of just the comparison between the two. He's fresher. He's the same age, basically. And he's super explosive. Going to be one of those guys that you want in the pass game, which is an added element that other guys won't have, because he can also run the ball. He's still 5'9", 210, and still able to be explosive in that way. And he's capable of making his own plays. That's one big thing I think we miss out on running backs, is like, yes, we want the guy that has, like, you see the production on paper, but you also want a guy that can like get the ball and like when things don't work is able to, make 3-4 yards or make, like one guy miss and then take, get a first
that's all
down.
the difference in the world, because if you make the first guy miss, it turns from a 2-yard gain to a 8-yard gain.
Exactly.
And that piles up very immensely over time. Like you said,
this guy can.
Yeah, exactly.
He can.
So, not a ton of wear and tear. He's an exciting prospect. The only thing is the age and, just kind of a little bit of a late bloomer, because even though he did have injuries, it took him until really he got to USC to really, truly break out as showing his elusiveness. Moving on to, I believe, the youngest player in the class, the entire draft class.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes, I believe so.
Braelon Allen out of Wisconsin. Wisconsin loves, given multiple opportunities to running backs. But he will be 20 and a half to start the year.
Yeah.
He's going to turn 20.
Yeah.
Soon. So he's still a teenager, and he's coming out in the draft. Doesn't have the wear and tear that, we've seen, like Melvin Gordon, Jonathan Taylor. He didn't have the 3 2,000-yard seasons, but very productive. And he's just, a bowling ball of a human being.
Well, I know he didn't have those big seasons, but he's still top 10 all-time rushing yards for Wisconsin. That tells you a lot, because they've had so many good running backs. Every year it feels like they've got a new running back. And so 6'2", 245. I mean, just massive, man. He still has like the youngness when he plays too, though. He runs into the middle of guys. He doesn't try to take half a man, where he could make a play, like where he could break off another, get away from somebody. He's trying to like run them over and stuff. But at the same time, 3.77 yards after contact, gonna always fall forward. Everybody else in this class kind of benefited on COVID seasons, red shirts. He is a 3-year in college guy, in and out. And that to me actually benefits him a lot in the NFL's eyes, because we talk about the threshold, the 28-year-old stuff. Like, if he will be on his 3rd contract when he turns 28, basically. So that gives him a lot of opportunity to just, be durable and stay in the league for a long time. I think, if you talked about his like comparison, you'd think more of like a Brandon Jacobs. No, I'm sorry, I'm blanking. The Giants running back.
Brandon Jacobs.
Yeah, Brandon Jacobs. Okay, I was wrong. That's kind of like where I see his running style. And
then modern day Gus Edwards,
yeah,
AJ Dillon, but better.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, more athletic. He's actually extremely athletic for his size. Just young, just very very green, I guess is the best way to put it. Like
Right.
he's not ready to like go beat the number one anywhere, but he can be, if you get him in the 4th round and you stash him for a year where he just gets like 25% of their carries, and then all of a sudden you're like, okay, our contract ended on our veteran running back. It's time for you to do it. He can do that. So that's exciting.
Yeah. He was one that I was very intrigued that he didn't really come out after like his breakout 1,500-yard season. It was more so because he's youthful and, injury free. And I think he's truly one that if he did return for his senior year, he maybe could have vaulted himself to a 2nd round pick because he would have had all the touches for Wisconsin. They were actually down last year compared to recent years of, flirting with 8-9 wins.
Right.
So he would have had even more opportunity to vault his status, and he's truly trying to capitalize on his youth. It's not going to pay off for him for his draft stock.
Right.
But, being a 20-and-a-half-year-old compared to a 21-and-a-half-year-old, like, it could be all the difference in the NFL experience compared to, being in the Wisconsin.
Yeah, so I have a stat here that's one of my favorite stats about him. So it's first half versus second half. Okay, just because, we talk about wearing down defenses and what kind of player he is. In the first half, 78 carries for 348 yards, 4 touchdowns, and a 21-yard long. Not that impressive, bro.
Mm-hmm.
In the second half, 103 carries, 636 rushing yards, 8 touchdowns, and a 52-yard long. Kind of tells you, what kind of player he is. He never he keeps the same the whole game while others are getting tired and stuff. His body is he is built to play running back, basically is how I'm putting it. He is just very, very, I guess the best way to put it is like he is built in the right ways. Like his legs are strong. He's got, all that stuff, but he still has a little bit of bend and flexibility, which you don't normally see with guys that are this like muscle bound and strong. So he has that bend, which is good.
Right. Yeah. And with him, it's just make sure you're continuing to refine your game because, like you said, he is a green prospect. Obviously, he's got one of the lower PFF grades, which that's not end all be all. But running backs is a position that can be graded higher, like on average, because there's more positive plays for that position, and he's basically middle of the pack in the country. Like didn't even crack the top 200.
Right.
So that is concerning, but at the same time, you're a prospect for a reason.
Yeah.
So,
where he is predicted is where is how I kind of like try to look at him because he is so young.
Yeah, and also it's like he's kind of one that we're slightly higher on than others. So we are fine with his 4th round, getting drafted, and if it's the right situation, imagine him going to the Chargers.
Yeah, absolutely.
That would be incredible. Obviously, they have Gus Edwards, so that's not necessarily a great compliment, but that's the style of play that they want to play, and that would maximize his strengths.
Right,
so,
for sure.
Moving into our top 3, we got Audric Estime out of Notre Dame. He's one that really was one of the biggest losers of the combine because of his really slow 40. But he had productivity. Maybe he just isn't the, combine isn't for him. But it didn't help him at all.
He is my favorite running back in this class. Truly favorite. Like not rankings apart, just favorite running back in this class. I am really sad that he didn't run, point like a 10th slower, because then we wouldn't have this conversation of him being 3rd. I think, a lot of people are lower on him, and I don't really get it. I think that he's just been great at everything, and he's not necessarily the best pass catcher, but if you just kind of look at his stats up and down, you're just like, okay, like this guy doesn't really have anything bad. Does anything bad, he's a good pass blocker. He's an okay pass catcher, great running back, really patient, finds holes. Le'Veon Bell-esque with running, how he like waits, goes, and he was the driving force in that offense this year for them. He had the second most touchdowns on the year. He had 100. This is my favorite stat because he is not fast, straight line speed, but his quickness is actually really, really great. 126.5 elusive rating. Basically, if you're over like 80, is really good. So just think about the fact that he's that much higher, and he's young. He's a young guy. Second PFF grade for running backs this year, which is, nothing to scoff over, of course. 4.27 yards after contact, which was first overall. 6.4 yards per average is okay. Not necessarily like as elite as some of the guys on this list, but it's okay. It's pretty good. He's a downhill runner. He's going to be a one-cut type of guy in an offense. Ended up being 5'11", 227, so he's got the size. He can take the contact. He's very strong player. Plays behind his pads, always falls forward. It's just, I'm really sad that he didn't do better at the combine, because then like I could be like, this guy deserves to be number one on a team. But with other guys kind of doing so much better, and I actually didn't drop him that much. He was actually kind of it's a tier here.
Yeah.
So there's a tier of 3 guys all right here. And the first guy that we're going to talk about in a little bit, he did all those things similar, but also ran well at the combine and was very capable in like the athleticism scoring, while Audric kind of missed out on that. And in recent years, 40 time has related to production at the NFL level at a high clip, which is another reason why we have to kind of like consider the fact that, running a 4.71, he might not have the athleticism to be productive and special at all at the next level.
Right.
But that, I don't want to put anything behind him.
I know we're basically dead in the middle of pro days. Has Notre Dame had their pro day yet? I don't.
Not at this point. Not at this point, no.
He's one that could benefit the most, because I know for a fact that he's going to run the 40.
Right.
If, because usually you only do it if you're trying to improve off of or you're trying to, there's questions about your speed, you have to match it or what have you. If he just shaves a 10th off that,
that would
he
be
might
perfect.
He might fall back into our top spot.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's purely off that PFF grade, one of the top in the country, productive.
Yeah.
You look at like Corum, who's basically 2/10 faster according to his 40, and how much worse he is in terms of making plays and
all these numbers.
Yeah, all the numbers.
Yeah.
Favorite Estime, but it's Corum that gets the.
Well, Estime had another great stat by Estime is he had 0 fumbles on 210 carries this year. Like, okay, he protects the ball. He doesn't turn the ball over. He's a good downhill runner. He had an 80-yard touchdown run. Okay, so now you're telling me he also can break away.
Yes.
I'm like, oh, well, why didn't I see the breakaway speed? Well, he's a football player more so than an athlete. And sometimes, you'd rather have that on your team. And another thing with him, like, so like I said, he had 18 touchdowns this year, which is second to Blake Corum.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like he's not productive.
Yes.
Like, he's completely productive. And I guess the tiering system for us is hard, because you kind of have all these guys in the same place, and you can't put 1A, 1B, 1C on them. Mm-hmm. You have to be like this, because we have to take like some sort of stance on players. But if Audric Estime ends up being like the best in this class, he's like very Zeke-esque. Mm-hmm. Now Zeke, of course, when he came out was all otherworldly, but like the same production. Audric had the same production. He just didn't play at Ohio State for a national championship and do it for multiple years.
Right.
He just kind of was under the radar. He doesn't have any drama. He has 0 fumbles on 210 carries, and
then we talk about the age. There's actually a big, like, basically there's a side of the fence. There's no 22-year-olds. You're either like 23 going on 24, or you're basically 21.
Right.
And he won't be 21 when the NFL season starts. So again, one of the youngest prospects, and he's productive. I think he's somebody that depending on the fit, whoever takes a chance on him, we're going to be talking about him as the summer goes on, in terms of best ball,
right?
In terms of like after we grade and evaluate drafts, like he might be one of the picks that it stands out because of where he goes.
And fit, like you said, fit matters for sure. He had 8 out of his 12 games. He had 8 95-plus yard rushing games. You know, he didn't do anything wrong. He didn't have any reason to be not higher on this list. It's just, there's other players, there's other guys that did really well also. So that's part of the thing. So.
And here's kind of a little bit of a unknown. We transitioned to Jonathon Brooks out of Texas. He was one that was top of the nation in rushing yards, was killing it. Product of his environment a little bit, but he was having a fantastic year. Tears his ACL in November, and he still earns all Big 12 second team despite missing a quarter, a third of the season.
Deservingly.
Yeah, he was fantastic. But the question to me is, one, you're coming off of ACL, so I don't expect you to be productive. If we're talking about fantasy, I'm not touching you, even if you do go to a good situation, because it's just tough to immediately come back, especially when it wasn't necessarily early in the season injury.
Right.
But my curiosity, because being a Texas fan, watching, he was behind, not last year, the year before, when we had Bijan and Roschon Johnson.
Right.
He was third among that trio in touches, and Roschon was actually the more productive back, and I don't even view Roschon as a guy that is an NFL caliber running back as like a starter.
Right.
Yet Jonathon Brooks is getting round 2 buzz. I don't understand it necessarily, but maybe you can tell me something I'm not seeing.
So at that point, when Roschon and Bijan were there, I mean, Jonathon Brooks was 19 years old. A very young guy at that point. That has a little bit to do with it. I think, explosiveness, elusiveness, when he is healthy, he was probably the best running back in this class. But that, like, he had an elusive grade of 140.3. I bet he would have run low 4.5s in the 40. So he has the athleticism, more than Roschon for sure. Bijan obviously is on another level. And so that it made it hard last year for him to actually get touches because of the depth in the backfield. And also, Roschon was a little bit older. I think he came out his senior year, his like true senior year. This is Jonathon Brooks' junior year. And so I think that might have a little bit to do with it. I mean, the difference between, so Jonathon Brooks is going to be 21 when the season starts.
Yeah.
Which is basically that we've talked about a lot of really young guys in this class, but 21 is like perfect, right where you want to be. And he's a little bit more mature than a guy like Braelon Allen from earlier. Lets his block set up, can make guys miss an open space, and then make another, like we talked about, one guy misses, you get an extra 5 yards, or to break big. So that's kind of my thing. I think he's definitely a better running back than Roschon. But coming into a class where it's not a very dominant top heavy class by any means, we don't have like a true second round guy. I think he kind of gets that benefit also, and why he's still this high on the board, even knowing he has an ACL tear. Yeah, don't touch him in fantasy. Yeah. But we've only seen one guy in Breece Hall ever do well after an ACL, and he had already played in the NFL at that point. So I wouldn't say this is a good guy to get. But the year after that, when he's, a year older, has a year off of the ACL, has been in an offense, he might be a guy that you want to get a little bit of.
Right. So. Yeah, I just, they're elucidating out of this world, and he made the most of his opportunity. Don't deny that at all. My concern is just, I think it was the perfect storm of just being able to have the most opportunities, because it was a young backfield in Texas.
Right.
And Texas actually, despite their decade plus of irrelevance from a college perspective, they still have churned out a ton of NFL caliber running backs. And I think it's more so just, Cedric Baxter's a true freshman, and say he was a sophomore, I don't think that I think it's more of a 60-40 split. I don't think he's getting the touches.
Right.
Maybe that says more about Cedric, or more of the other guys in the backfield. But I don't know. I'm a little kind of, I guess,
Weary
of it.
Okay.
However, that doesn't mean that he can't be a productive NFL running back. I just thought that nothing really stood out until this year, and this year we got no one else to just immediately give every carry to, so you're going to get the 20 touches a game, and he made the most of it in an offense that is really caters to running back production.
In his 8 out of 8 games, he had at least 98 rushing yards, 9 total touchdowns, 20-ish attempts per game. But what I will say is it was a committee until the end of the Alabama game. So after the Alabama game, it became his backfield. Did he earn it? I don't know. After he got it though, he went off and went crazy, and we were all talking about him doing these things. One thing I do like about him is, he's still pretty good in the pass game. He can catch the ball, so he's not just a one-trick pony, running only. He's actually one of the more explosive guys when he gets the ball in his hands in space. So I actually do like him, but I do see the concerns. I think, if this was a better class, we probably wouldn't have him in this area, but we just can't say that without, there's no other guys.
I just feel like since there is no, obviously not even close to a first round running back, but not even a second round grade that we would have on a running back. I think that there's a chance that despite coming off an injury, usually that brings somebody down. But I think because of the lack of depth at this position, he might get overdrafted.
Oh, yeah.
And then in addition to the concerns that you have, it's like, then you got to live up to a second round billing instead of being a mid round pick.
Yeah, he could be the first guy off the board, and it could be really early. It's definitely that definitely worries me for a team, because he's not going to be able to impact your team early, like right away. And if you do use a lot of draft capital on him and don't get his first year basically at all, and you're basically on a 3-year contract with a guy that has had injury history and isn't necessarily going to wow you, I guess is the best way to put it. Like he's not going to be a 1A like alpha running back in the next level to me, but he is an all around style running back, so he can fit basically anywhere. But yeah, he's definitely a guy that you need to be worried for. Like when you go to drafts and your team drafts him, make sure it's worth the pick, worth the price. That's
my thing. Yeah. It's not the talent. It's, are you drafting him where he should be drafted? And I think that he might get drafted a round earlier than he should go.
Just because of the lack of depth. Yeah. I get it. Yeah.
So, but moving on, Trey Benson, our number 1 running back. He's one that did make the most of his combine. I believe he had the fastest 40 time.
One of the fastest. Jalen Wright had a faster 40, and there was one other, but yeah.
But still, not many stood out, and breaking the 4.3 range.
Was getting in.
Pretty solid. Solid production. Didn't incredibly just have a breakout year, but he just kind of has a lot of tools.
Yeah. So funny enough, he's number 1 on our list, and I would consider his stock falling in 2023. Just because he wasn't that productive. Like, I mean, he only had 905 yards, a sub 6 yards per attempt. But at the same time, he does things that most of the other running backs cannot do. 2 years ago against, I think it was NC State. Yeah, NC State. He returned a kickoff return for 107 yards. Like, that's, just to kind of talk about like explosiveness and stuff. He has one of the highest 15 plus yards per rush average. So like basically that means like if he's handed the ball off 10 times, he is the highest percentage of getting to 15 plus yards. Because he's so explosive. Like when he gets into the hole, he is shot out of a cannon. He just fell off. He was hidden in some games. Now that could be, because of the Florida State offense and how they run it. But some games he was the best player on the field, and then some games he was not there, basically. And that's why, of course, 5.8 yards per attempt. If you looked at it based on game by game, you'd see 12 yards per attempt, and then you'd see 3. And you'd be like, that doesn't weigh out to me. But so that's kind of my biggest concerns with him. Just
now, I know,
not being there.
I know Florida State had an undefeated regular season and was a productive team.
Mm-hmm.
Was his lack of production more so just a committee approach that Florida State takes, or is there depth at that position that just they wanted everybody to get touches where they could?
We had a good backup, but Trey Benson was by far the alpha in the offense. I mean, he played most of the 60% of the snaps. We also got up on teams at times where we didn't have to play him, and we brought in other guys. So those numbers are obviously deflated a little bit, but at the same time, like 6 out of his 13 games, he had less than a 4.0 yards per attempt. So that's a little worrisome, because like you'd expect, it's the ACC. Like we should be running over everybody. We basically did run over everybody, truly, but he should have been playing better to me. But my favorite stat by him is, I just talked about the explosiveness and stuff. 10 out of his 14 touchdowns came on 15+ yard runs. So that kind of tells you like what kind of athlete he is and what he can do in open space. Sometimes he just can't get there, I guess. I don't know if defenses were schemed really well against him or if it just was he didn't trust it or something. But when he's his best, he is the best player in this class, like for running back. Mm-hmm. When he's at his lowest, he's not there. So I guess that's kind of my thing. He just needs to be more consistent, and he would do great. I mean, he's 6'1", 223. That's above height averages, but the weight's good. Ran a 4.39, has all that other stuff. It's just I wish he would have done it more often.
Yeah, and that kind of what kind of stands out to me about it is that you said his stock in 2023 actually dropped, and that to me kind of sums up this class. It's just there's either baggage or red flags with almost every prospect, and there's no one that stands out. And it's been a while since we've seen a class like this where the top is just a crapshoot,
right? In
all the good ways, but also all the bad ways.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So that's the 2024 NFL Draft running back class. Lots of players, lots of guys. We could probably see somebody that's not on this list become the best running back. Mm-hmm. That's kind of how this works, especially at the running back position, because it's about fits and opportunities. But also, we don't have anybody that's just a surefire guy. So
yeah, it definitely is one of the hardest position groups to rank this year for sure. But we appreciate you guys tuning in. Please like, subscribe, comment, discuss with us.
Yeah, for sure.
Check out other videos that we got going on. We just have done combine breakdowns, and we're in the middle of our positional ranking. So please go check it out. Let us know what you think. Who's too high, who's too low, somebody that you like. We want to know.
Yeah, check out our Mock the Mock series. We're going to be coming out with our second mock draft soon, so that'll be good. We'll have all the new information with all the free agency moves and the trades to kind of make better picks and place guys better. But yeah, we really appreciate it, and go check out our socials like Cam said, and we will see y'all next time.
Y'all take care, guys. Thank you.